chocolate and peanut butter.
Sound is great. Everything looking good. And I am ready when you guys are.
All right, this is your interview, young lady. The floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm here with Kamon Freeman, who is a candidate for the DC delegate seat right now, part of the Green Party. I wanted to start off by asking you, are you a native Washingtonian?
Well, first, it's an honor to be sitting here with you, young lady.
Thank you.
Just be part of your journey as a young journalist. We need more of those, the truth tellers. And I'm part of the DC statehood Green Party. I have to throw that in there.
Okay.
And yes, I'm one of the indigenous natives who have survived the crack epidemic, and Reaganomics, gentrification, and I'm still here, and we're here to tell the truth, shame the devil, and flip tables like Jesus.
Okay. What neighborhood did you grow up in?
Here we go. So Grandma House was Kentucky Avenue Southeast.
Okay.
I would have went to Easton if I had stayed put, but crack was a thing when I grew up, and my grandmother loved me. And so I was shipped off like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to Alexandria, where I went to Mount Vernon High School. Alexandria was predominantly a white school, and I hated it. But in hindsight, it prepared me, and it made me less uncomfortable being in spaces outside of my comfort zone. And so I don't know if she had the forethought of that. She just knew I was going to be safer there than in our neighborhood. But I lived all over the city. My grandfather had an apartment on 12th and Rhode Island, Shaw, for 30 years. So my grandfather's apartment on 12th and Rhode Island became my father's apartment and became my first apartment. And no one told us about, Tenants Opportunity to Purchase Act, TOPA, or even if it even existed then. We could have had ownership and equity in that building. I feel like it was a family heirloom, an inheritance that was lost. Whenever I go by, when I was born, 1970, Shaw was 90% black, and now it's like less than 30%. And it's because the way the city was designed, they didn't have any retention plan for long-time residents or small businesses in mind in their development. And so as a survivor, I'm here to address those inequities.
Okay. So can you tell me a little history about We Act Radio, a little bit about why you co-founded it, and what did you want to accomplish with that?
We Act Radio was co-founded by myself and Alex Lawson, who is executive director of Social Security Works. He is a warrior on the Hill that's preventing Social Security from falling into the clutches of the GOP and the Republican Party and some conservative, right-wing leaning Democrats who want to see the privatization of Social Security. They want to have their clutches on this $1 trillion budget. So shout out to him. That is what underwrites We Act Radio. But the catalyst that created We Act Radio was because Kathy Hughes, who is the founder of Radio One, which is now currently the largest conglomerate of black-owned radio stations in America, publicly traded. I know you was telling off camera that you had just seen Talk to Me, with Dewey Hughes was her husband, and she took over the business as he went on, and that was WL 1450 that P.D. Green had made infamous, and she capitalized on that. And no disrespect to her, because at that time she was a revolutionary. I remember hearing revolutionary content coming out of for WOL. Like I told you, I was a disgruntled postal worker for 9 years, and I used to listen to WL all the time. And with her and Dick Gregory, and they was running the voodoo down. But unfortunately, a lot of our elders who have made significant contributions to the culture and to the movement in later life have become gatekeepers for the status quo. And unfortunately, she has become one of them, much like our DC delegate. And in Kathy Hughes' case, she was railing at the top of the hour, the bottom of the hour against the late great Congressman John Conyers, who later said that WEAC Radio was the most radical AM station in North America. Shout out to the legacy of John Conyers. But he had introduced a bill called the Performance Arts Tax. Because basically what he was saying was that artists, when their records are played, they should be paid as well. Whether they own the publishing or not, because often artists and black people, black artists in particular, have had their publishing lost in bad deals. And so even though we know their names, we hear their records, they still destitute. And if they're unable to perform, that's a wrap. And so he said, well, he wanted to change that because this is the guy that introduced jazz concerts to the Congressional Black Caucus events. Okay, he brought arts and culture to those spaces, and he said we need to protect those artists as they age. And so it was the performance arts tax. The performer of the song should be paid just like the publisher of that song should be paid. And when you think about it, that should be right? You know, the person that wrote the song is getting paid. The person that owns the rights to the song is getting paid. How about the artist that actually did the art? Mm-hmm. Okay? Yeah. And so she got on her high horse at the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour saying that this will put her out of business. This was an attack, a direct attack on black radio. God forbid that we have to actually pay the artists for the work that my business model is predicated upon, right? You know? And so I felt she was being disingenuous because, I mean, what? You made $15 million this year, and if this goes by and becomes law and is put in effect, you only going to make 12? I mean, my hemorrhoids bleed for you, right? And so she never did that in terms of stopping the music for, 9/11, Hurricane Katrina, stolen elections, and I'm talking about the real stolen election in 2000 when, George Bush's brother gave him Florida, you know what I'm saying? But Republicans didn't have no problem with that because it was to their favor. So I put together a panel because her movement was called Save Black Radio. And I was like, look, if we want to save black radio, we need to change black radio because some of my friends are established artists, but they can't get their records played on the radio. Some of them was hip hop ambassadors for the State Department, travel around the world. Some of them had won Peabody Awards, the only hip hop artist to win a Peabody Award. Music was produced on the Boondocks. Raheem DeVaughn. These are some of my friends who couldn't at the time get their records played on the radio, right? And so I said that we need to change black radio, not just save black radio, because you turn on black radio right now, we have a genocide going on. But if you listen to black radio, commercial black radio in the morning, you have grown men playing on the phone, calling people at their job with prank calls. With all that's going on in the world, this is what you're doing every morning with millions of listeners. So I said we need to change that. And so we put together a panel discussion sponsored by Busboys and Poets. I had trouble getting people to come to join that panel because it was like Kathy Hughes' name was like Kaiser Soze. You couldn't say her name, And out of that event, which was well attended, someone challenged us and said, well, look, if you think it's so easy to run a radio station, why don't you get your own? Why don't you do something yourself? I'm like, ooh, do something. And someone came to me with an offer of an AM station that was available, and it didn't work out with him and I, but that planted the seed, and here we are today. So WEAC Radio is a result of Kathy Hughes being disingenuous about profit sharing with artists. So we're here to bring equity to the space. And that's what we was able to do. And we are celebrating our 13th anniversary this November. And we're on the radical side of Martin Luther King Avenue. And now we're a community anchor institution, an award-winning community anchor institution. And I'm very proud of that. And one of the silent partners is one of the founders of Legacy DC. And that's why we're here today.
Okay. So with all of that being said, if you could sum up your activism in a couple of words or in a sentence, what would you say? What is it that you want people to know you stand for?
Wow. Was that the heavy question that I asked you for? Was that
No.
what? Oh wow, you got
I already had that
you
one in my
okay,
list.
Okay, cool. She's hard hitting. Shout out to the new journalists. Shout out to new journalists because I'm here buying time as I process my thoughts on that. How do I summarize my activism? Wow. Well, the first thing that came to mind is something that originally Paul Robeson said, but it was given to me by Harry Belafonte. We call him Mr. B. In React Radio in our storefront window, I have a mugshot of Martin Luther King on his first arrest, who wasn't much older than you in his first arrest. I think he was like 25. And Harry Belafonte signed it. And that sits in my storefront window. And when Harry Belafonte passed, we now have one of his album covers in the middle of the studio. And so Harry Belafonte said that artists are the gatekeepers of the truth. They are the radical voices of this world. And that really inspired me. But to summarize my activism, I will have to go with something that Muhammad Ali said. It's the shortest poem on record. It's simply me, we. And I think that best summarizes, because we have to go, individuality should be celebrated. Individualism should not be tolerated. So we have to move from the I, from the me, to the we. We have to begin to think collectively. We have to think about the big picture. We got to think broader. We got to think beyond just your neighborhood, beyond just DC, beyond just America. We have to think beyond just this section of the planet. We have to think globally. We need to think global and act local. And I think that summarizes what I mean when I say me, we.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell me a little bit about what it means to be a Green Party statehood candidate, maybe for like college students like myself who may not know what that means? Can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Well, there's a whole world that you don't know, and that's by design. They want to keep it that way. So I want us to understand there's three educations. You have the education they give you for free. That's our public school education. That's funded inequitably. Everyone doesn't get the same access to information and resources because it's attached to property taxes. And this goes on to what Malcolm X said: if you live in a poor neighborhood, you get a poor education. You get a poor education, you get a poor paying job, which enables you to live in a poor paying neighborhood, which is a very vicious cycle. And so because our public education system is funded by property taxes, that therein lies the problem. It's determining where you're going to be and how much resources you're going to have. And in this city, even determines your life expectancy. And so that free education is limited and tied to that. The next education is the one you pay for, your college and what you have. And you know how that goes. How much you're paying for college determine how much information and success you have in life. But the most important one is the one you give yourself, whether it's doing conversations, whether it's doing listening to your elders, whether reading independently or traveling the world. Those are the transformational aspects of education. And so I just want to make sure that people understand that if you don't know something, it's now, because we're in the information age, it's incumbent upon you to find that out. These tech companies may have nefarious plans and things in place, but Google as an information source is your friend, but you have to ask the right questions. And so the fact of the matter is that they'll tell you, third parties, they can't win. Mm-hmm. They just here to steal votes. That is the talking points of our enemies, the status quo, the gatekeepers, the ones that maintain the position of power. Of course, they're not going to tell you how to dismantle the system. I think Audre Lorde said that you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, right? It means you have to think something, you have to come up with your own. And third party is one of the things we came up with our own, because yes, the third party is the way the system is designed is making sure that a third party cannot actually win an election in terms of the popular vote. They have electoral college as their safety valve to prevent that from ever happening. So you should be mad about the electoral college. But in terms of stealing votes, if I'm telling you that I under no circumstance will vote for Trump, under no circumstance will I vote for Genocide Joe, right? So you're not stealing my vote when I choose to vote for a third party. You know, what are you telling me, that my vote belongs to you? You know what I'm saying? As Joe Biden would say, if you're not voting Democrat, you're not black. I didn't vote Democrat in my life, and clearly I'm very black. You know, but what they don't tell you is that a third party only has to get 5% of the national vote. Just 5% of the national vote. It doesn't have to win the election. 5%. You know what happens when you get 5% in a third party? It triggers federal funding. It triggers access to the debates on a national stage in the next election cycle. That means it will effectively bring to an end the two-party corrupt corporate monopoly over the U.S. political system. Australia has dozens of political parties. UK has dozens. Why do we only have two? Paper or plastic, right? And those are false choices, because I don't have to choose between paper and plastic. I can bring my own bag, and it's recyclable. It's better for the environment. You know, and I can use it over and over again. So what I'm trying to convince to people is that we need to bring our own bag to the table in order to change the game, because the true definition of insanity is doing the same exact thing over and over, expecting a different outcome. So how long will we continue to go back and forth with this lesser than two evils?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what pushed you to run for DC's delegate seat?
The catalyst for me running to challenge an 87-year-old, 34-year incumbent, Eleanor Holmes Norton, was because of a genocide. A genocide that they're denying is actually happening. Like, they don't believe your lying eyes, mm-hmm. You know. And, you know, in life, you sometimes get an opportunity to meet your heroes, but unfortunately, that's not always a good thing. And so, you know, you meet somebody that you love, and you sometimes will find out that you don't like them. And I had the melancholy pleasure of meeting Eleanor Holmes Norton in her office, and I thought I was going to talk to my beloved, distinguished elder and get her to sign on to a ceasefire. And she said that she wasn't ready for a ceasefire. And I was like shocked. I'm like, what, you know, I wish I had pushed further and said, you know, well, how many people got to die for you to be ready? Where's your comfort level? Because she was saying it was like premature or whatever. Mm-hmm. And but I didn't challenge her there because we sometimes are subjected to this parental instinct that we're just supposed to bow down to the establishment, bow down to our elders, bow down to those who came before us. But what happens when they're wrong? What happens when your elder is wrong? And that really set heavy with me because I felt that she was wrong. Mm-hmm. And when I realized that we shared the same elder, Eleanor is a Delta. Her mentor, I shared the same mentor. Dorothy Irene Height, she's a Delta. My favorite sororities are Deltas because they do a lot more. Well, Dorothy Irene Height, National Council of Negro Women president, the only building owned by black people on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., she led 2 delegations to the World Conference on Racism in South Africa. And the only 2 countries that walked out of that conference was Israel and America, because they was concerned about their allegations of apartheid in their treatment of the Palestinians. She led 2 delegations to that. So fast forward, her mentor was for the self-determination of Palestinians. Eleanor is for the self-determination of Washington, D.C. residents. And we don't see the connection. And I felt that she was out of step. And I felt that she fell, and unfortunately, in the same space that Cathy Hughes had fell in, where our distinguished, accomplished elders have now become gatekeepers for the status quo. Mm-hmm. And so wrestling with that pushed me outside my comfort zone to do something. And I felt that this was the time to take it to the next level and to challenge the establishment head on and start talking about these problems and start talking about what should be happening and start implementing what should be happening. And this is my opportunity to do that with respect and give her flowers and thank her for her years of service and throw her a beautiful retirement party and bake her a cake.
Okay. So speaking of Eleanor Holmes Norton, she has had a high percentage of primary and general election votes for the DC delegate in the past. What is it about you that you want DC voters to know that may persuade them to consider you?
Well, first of all, it's been 34 years of the same message. And so either you are comfortable and content off the status quo and your position in it, or you feel that there are things that needs to be addressed, some things that have been unsaid, some things that need to be done to change and move us forward. You are either in one of those two camps. Now, if you are in the camp that is benefiting from the current system, then obviously you want to maintain that system. And if you are not benefiting from the current system, then you want to change that system. And I'm gambling that there's a lot more people that's willing to change that system, because the average white family in this city has 81 times the wealth of the average black family in this city. Okay, DC is the most dangerous city for a black woman of any social economic background to give birth. All right. East of the river went 25 years without a bookstore, but has a proliferation of liquor stores. There's over 40 bookstores in the city. Zero was in east of the river, the blackest areas of the gentrified city left, for 25 years. And there's a direct correlation between violence, crime, and illiteracy. You know, there's also the fact that if an undeveloped mind, and I submit to you that's anyone that's under 25, is devoid of certain nutrients, that they are 51% more prone to violent behavior who lives in food deserts in this city. You know, our children, 30% of our children live in poverty. Almost 100% of those kids are black kids. So if you afford the status quo, then you're here to maintain those. And these all existed for the 34 years of her tenure. So if you're not willing to change that, then I think the problem is more on you and your comfort, as opposed to what needs to be addressed and what needs to change. And typically, DC has been blindly led by a Democratic Party who has taken us for granted. And that's not to try to throw love to Republicans. I'm not going between the paper, plastic, lesser two evils. What I'm saying, we're trying to change the game and bring our own bag. The third party is a bag, a DC statehood Green Party. It's our own party. Why not utilize it? Our own party. And I urge people to educate themselves on the origins of that party. DC Statehood Green Party. She's been fighting for statehood her whole life. We have it on the wall right here. But what needs to change? She's been saying the same message. Oh, well, we have all these disenfranchised voters in D.C., and if they should do the right thing and grant a statehood, you know, they don't care anything about disenfranchised voters that's predominantly black in the nation's capital. They have voter suppression laws all over this country. You know, she should be showing up in every state that has been implementing voter suppression laws. That way, she can be showing solidarity with other people who have the lack of self-determination as DC has. You know, and so I just think that we should be talking about DC statehood as a national issue. It's not a local issue. This is the issue that has the greatest potential to flip the balance of power in this country, because both parties, Republican and Democrat, benefit from nothing getting done. That just serves to maintain the status quo. But theoretically, if we were to get statehood, we would have two quote unquote progressive Democrats in the mix. Now you don't have an excuse for not getting anything done, right? And so the fact is that usually in DC, the elections are decided by June 4th in the Democratic primary. Whoever wins the primary wins the election. They have never gone these extra rounds that I'm going to be bringing to the table, which means I'm going to be campaigning all summer. I'm going to see you in November. Right? This is Ali versus Foreman. No one expects me to win, except for no one told Ali that. And I'm going to go these extra rounds. I run 3 miles every day. The sun shines, and so I'm prepared to go the distance. And I don't think the status quo is going to be ready for that. And so those extra rounds are going to be a game changer. And the thing is that there are 80,000 college kids such as yourself in this city. And if they were aware that they are eligible to vote in D.C., they're eligible for D.C. residency because of their enrollment in D.C. Universities. They can't vote at home. They have to choose, vote at home or vote here. If I can convince them to vote here, that would be a game changer. Because unfortunately, DC also is home to a lot of bougie Negroes who work for the government who are unfortunately very comfortable with the status quo and maintaining those inequities that I just so eloquently described to you earlier. And that's the linchpin on where we're gonna see which way the wind blows. But I'll see you in November.
So what are some of the main changes that you want to see happen in DC?
We have to have the wherewithal to look at what Martin Luther King died for. His last book was Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? A lot of people are very familiar with Martin Luther King's last speech, but they're not as familiar with his next to his last speech, which was delivered right here in Washington, D.C. It was entitled Remaining Awake During a Great Revolution. He goes on to say in that speech that far too often people find themselves living in periods of great social change, but yet they fail to develop the new ideas, the new mental responses that the new situation demands. They end up sleeping through a revolution, right? But they want to tell you that stay woke is a pejorative. Oh, you want those woke people. Yeah, you want them unconscious people? You know what I'm saying? And so I want to represent everything King was saying in his radicalism, and that's 1966 to 68. All right, because once Malcolm was killed, Martin got radical real quick. He went from I have a dream in 63 to 67. He's saying that dream has become a nightmare. And so he talked about a guaranteed income. You know, he talked about addressing the root causes of crime and violence. We're not doing that. We're still screaming more police and more prison. Look, America is the largest prison system in the entire world, okay? And DC has more police per capita than anywhere else in America. So clearly, getting tough on crime is not working. It's not the answer, unless, of course, you're making money off these privately owned prisons, or you're making money off the corrupt, dysfunctional justice system, you know, and many people are. You know, but we need to get into the thick of it and address the root causes of violence. I identify the correlation between violence, crime, and literacy, and the inequities without access to that. I identify how nutrition is part of violence. In fact, they even acknowledge it in this draconian secured D.C. crime bill that harps back to 1994 crime bill that just passed in D.C. Because unfortunately, we have a lot of black politicians who are supposed to represent us, but they're not serving us, and they go along with the status quo. They said that they want to have more nutritional access to DC prisoners. It's in the secure DC bill. So you want to address some of the root causes of violence once they are in the system, but you want to address it before they go into the system. And people need to understand that police do not prevent crime. Police respond to crime. So we're talking about preventive. So before somebody gets hurt, before somebody gets killed, before someone gets robbed, before a crime is committed, we want to address the root causes. Let's start there. And then I also want to acknowledge that so goes DC, so goes the country, so goes the world. There's policies that are made in this city that affect local, national, and international. So we should be thinking about all those levels. And a lot of resources are being directed outside that should be directed inside. And I always tell people this, that if America was worth the paper it was printed on, you would expect that DC would be the shining city on the hill, that 68 square miles would be the one place they can point to as a shining example of democracy at work, right? Because we would have the best schools, we would have the best hospitals, we would have the best roads and what have you. But we don't. We have some of the most negative outcomes. Our poverty rate is twice the national average. Our literacy rate is twice the national average. The most dangerous city for a black woman to give birth. I mean, the list goes on and on, you know. But you hear them still talking about the homicides, you know, and why we got to do this. They didn't care about that until 2 white people got shot. This is what Nina Simone called a white backlash, because there are more opioid deaths than there are homicides and traffic fatalities combined. But you don't see them making no rush to address that, because unfortunately the status quo is not in the business of saving lives. They're in here about destroying lives and displacing black people. And this needs to be addressed and need to be brought to bear.
What is your hope for college students like myself and others at Trinity to get out of your activism? And what can we do to contribute?
I want to invoke the words of Alice Walker, the Pulitzer Prize winner of Color Purple. She says the greatest power is convincing people they don't have any. We have to convince young people and not so young people that they have power. They want to convince you that there's nothing you can do. And there's always something you can do. You know, I am physically stronger than you. That does not mean just because I'm more powerful that you are powerless. Okay? If I try to impose my will upon you, there's something you can do. You can scream, you can down one, you can throw a brick on my head. You know, there's something you can do. Because like back to Audre Lorde, she said that you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. That's very true, but you can't beat them across the head with it, you know? So there's always something you can do. And I want to convince people that it is our challenge to rise to the occasion to do something. Do something to challenge the inequities that we find ourselves in, that we should never go quietly in the dark and accept them. Because when you look at every movement, it was led by young people. People forget Malcolm, Martin, Medgar Evers, Che Guevara. These were young people. These four men were killed at 39. They died at 39. So everything we known for them to have done in their lives was done in their 20s and 30s. 20s and 30s. You know, but we're not empowering young people today. We're here to empower you. We wanted to make these resources available for you. We wanted to make sure that you know that your voice is just as important as anyone else's voices. So that is what I want young people. I want Nipsey Hussle said the greatest act of humanity is inspiration. So I want to inspire other people to get up and do something and believe in themselves more than they believe in anything else. And if I'm able to do that, I think that energy would be my greatest gift to humanity.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you might want to add, or?
Oh yeah, like what can you? How can we help you? How can we support your work, Kimon? It's Kimon Freeman for Congress. So that's Freeman, the number 4, Congress.com. That's Freeman, the number 4, Congress.com. Typically, they want you need money to support a campaign and have you, and that'd be great and dandy. People can make donations at the site. But just as important, I think, is people's time. I think we need elders that have the wisdom and the experience, and we need the elders who have the skill, and the young people who have the will. To come together and let's make something happen, because the mantra for this campaign is, again, Martin Luther King's words. We need a revolution of values, and so in order for us to have a revolution of values, we need to have the wisdom of our elders and the energy of our young people to be brought to bear. And I hope that I can create this intergenerational dialogue. And this is not a black campaign or a white campaign. This is an international inspired campaign, a Pan-Africanist campaign, a world festival, if you will, because we want to acknowledge that we're not beholden to any flag. There's no flag big enough to house all of us. Because where's the flag for the planet? The closest thing to it would be the red, black, and green flag for Marcus Garvey, because that's the only flag that I know of that doesn't represent a nationality or specific government agency. It represents the land, the blood, and the people. And I want to invoke that, and we need to recognize that we have the power to do that, and that the status quo is desperate in maintaining itself. That's why we see them going to great lengths, whether it be because they got several ways to say the N-word. They can, the anti-woke, DI, what have you. It's all different coded language for the same things. And let me close by saying this, is that housing is a big issue for me. I think that's one of those big tents that everyone can fit under, because whether you're one of those white families that has 81 times the wealth of the average black family, most of us are paying more than 30% of our income in housing. But no one tells us that it's because Wall Street is buying up houses and jacking up the prices. No one tells us that, HUD, the Housing and Urban Development federal agency, has a guideline that stipulates that you shouldn't pay more than 30% of your income plus utilities for housing, right? But yet it's not a regulation. It's not a law. It's just a guideline. I want to make that a law. I want to make that real. So that is something that I think is a gift to everyone, that I'm going to decrease your housing costs. Because, the Pentagon is actually spending $90,000 for parts that's worth $100. That's a fact. You can look this up. I'm about to put it on my IG page, in fact. So they always got money for war, but they can't do anything for the people, But in Austria, Vienna, Austria, who was rebuilt by U.S. taxpayers' money, because after World War II, they had the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe. It's just that Vienna, Austria used the money in the best way. They created what you call social housing, which you only pay 30% of your income for. Well, in Vienna, Austria is one of the safest cities in the world. They don't have any crime, one of the lowest murder rates in the world. They don't have any homeless people. They don't have any ghettos, because everybody is living harmoniously because within their means. Everything, all your basic needs are taken care of. Mm-hmm. And if we had a guaranteed income, if we had people who wouldn't spend more than 30% of their income in housing, we would have that same utopia. So when people look at me and say, oh, well, this is unachievable, he's living in no, there actually are places that exist on this earth, and that is one of them. And I'm only espousing everything Martin Luther King talked about. But unfortunately, this country and this city, they don't accept Martin Luther King. That's why he was taken off the stage for making an anti-war speech 1 year after he did it. Just symbolize that. He's made an anti-war speech April 4th, 67. He was assassinated April 4th, 68. He has a monument in this city, and the quote on that monument was so radical to the establishment that they sandblasted it to censor it because they couldn't take it. And that's what we're dealing with. And I'm here to pick up the tools to finish the radical work of Martin Luther King and everything that he fought for and died for. So I pose to you, you and you and you, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Freeman, 4, Congress.com. And we have to support our young people in their endeavors and make sure that they have the tools that they need to go forth with the confidence that they deserve.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me, agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, and thank you for having me. Peace and blessings.